If you're someone who launches their long irons quite low, or you don't see much difference in distance in between the irons, then a hybrid golf club is definitely a type of golf club that you should consider adding to your golf bag. With the slightly wider sole and lower centre of gravity, it's much easier to slide through the turf and get the golf ball up into the air quite easily. And with the larger profile, up and down and side to side, it's a much friendly golf club to strike on off-centre hits as well. How do we go about striking this golf club? Well, if we understand that the hybrid is simply a replacement for the iron, then the way we set up and the swing thoughts that we deploy are exactly the same as the irons. And in today's video, we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. So how do we go about setting up to the hybrid? First things first is the width of stance. The way to make our width of stance appropriate is to make sure we're standing fairly shoulder width apart, and the way we go about that is really important. A lot of people think about shoulder width as thinking about the outside of our feet being in line with our shoulders, but actually think about the ankles. Make sure the ankles are sitting straight underneath our shoulders, and that's how we're going to make an appropriate width of stance. So if we have wider shoulders, naturally we'll stand much wider, narrower will go narrower. So it's a really good way to understand what that phrase shoulder width apart means, so that we have a width of stance tailored to yourself. Ball position, the best way to understand ball position is to understand, loosely speaking, there's 3 ways to strike the golf ball. We have how we generally like to strike the short irons and the mid irons, where we take a nice divot, compress the ball and squeeze it out there. The way we want to strike our longer irons, up into our woods and hybrid, where we're still hitting down on the golf ball, but not with that same amount of severity. It's more of a bruise. And then we have the driver, which is exclusively there to be hit on the way up. So therefore, we have a really easy to understand 3 ball position rule. If I was set with this first ball here in the middle of my stance, that would be for mid to short irons. If I roll that ball away without moving, you'll now see 1 ball ahead. We have our long irons, hybrids and our woods, and 1 ball ahead of that, which will naturally be set just inside or on my left heel. We have our driver stance. So in this particular case, we're going to go for ball position number 2, just ahead of centre, and that's where we want to see our hybrid begin. Lastly, from a weight distribution perspective, a lot of people will sometimes either have lots of weight on this left leg to try and squeeze the golf ball with the hybrid, or they'll have lots of weight on this back leg to try and help the hybrid up. We don't want to influence either. Let's make sure from a setup perspective we have our weight distribution fairly 50-50 at address, and we'll talk about how we move on or off the golf ball in the swing from there. Now let's talk about the swing. As we kind of said at the start of this video, the hybrid is the replacement for the iron, and that's why we want to hit it like the iron. And one of the crucial parts when it comes to hitting the iron, and in turn the hybrid itself, is we need to make sure the golf club is descending onto the golf ball. However, also, as we said in the ball position segment of this video, we don't hit down on the golf ball with that same severity as we would with a wedge. It's more of a bruising of the ground rather than a breaking of the ground. So I've got a little chalk line here just in front of the golf ball, or if you're on the grass driving range, you can put a tee about a thumb width or so just in front of the golf ball as well, and just get used to striking that chalk line or striking that tee in a manner which is more of a bruise. We don't want to see any kind of like digging of the leading edge into the ground where the golf club might get stuck. We have got this big wide sole, and that's what we want to use when we think about bruising and striking the ground. So firstly, let's understand what strike is, and actually when we come to striking the golf ball, give it some speed as well. The way we get this golf club in the air and get it as far as possible is not just only to get the appropriate setup and strike, but influence some speed in there. The more speed we have, the more launch we have, and the more distance that we'll see in turn to help you hit this golf club much better. And the final thing to consider when it comes to hitting the golf ball is how good of a job can you do of holding your finish. And we want to understand what that actually means. So Rory McIlroy style, someone who's known for holding a nice balanced and composed finish. What do you see in that finish? Well, you see weight finishing on the lead side, the right foot's up in the air as a result, and you can see the hands over that kind of left shoulder, lead shoulder type position. The reason that's so important is to get to that position, you have to have deployed appropriate or efficient weight transfer through the golf ball and made a nice kind of rotation and finish in order to get to that composed position. So without overthinking it too much, just understand that the task is to hold your finish, and if you can do that in a composed and balanced way, then that indicates to yourself that you've moved through the golf ball in a nice appropriate manner. You should find it much more natural to strike the ground, strike that chalk line / tee in an appropriate place as well, rather than being the look of where lots of people will fall back or stay on this back leg to try and help the golf ball up, oftentimes seeing a strike which is on top of the golf ball, so a top, or bottoming out just a little bit too behind the golf ball from there. So as a recap of everything we want to see, make sure your setup is appropriate. Put the ball in the right place, the weight's fairly 50-50, and obviously I'm going to be shoulder width stance. Now we understand that we have to strike this chalk line or strike this tee with good amounts of speed so we can see that golf ball go somewhere, and do that in a way where I can come through to a nice, full, composed finish. If you follow those hybrid keys, I guarantee you're going to become a much better hybrid player, and hopefully, if you haven't already, you'll consider adding a hybrid into your bag soon. Hope that helps. Any questions, please feel free to drop me a comment in the comment section down below, or drop me a follow on my socials. For any online or in-person coaching, drop me a follow on the SKILLEST app, search David Atkins and drop me a message from there. But until next time, catch you on the next one.